Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a really core idea in Buddhist thought, right view,
Mm.
samadhi.
Mm.
Think of it as, well, the essential perspective for understanding the true nature of things,
That's a good way to put it.
We'll be using the Samadhi Sutta as our main guide here to really unpack what it means to have this clear vision.
Yeah.
Our mission really is to pull out the key insights so you can grasp this pretty multifaceted concept without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Exactly. And the Samadhi Sutta presents right view not as like a single belief you hold,
Right.
but more as a whole network of understandings. It's really about seeing how everything's interconnected.
Okay.
So we're going to explore these connections today, try to give you a practical sense of what right view actually entails.
All right, so the sutta kicks off with a pretty fundamental distinction, akusala and kusala, the unwholesome and the wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it's more than just, a list of don't do this.
Yeah.
It digs down into what's driving these actions.
That's the crucial point, absolutely. The sutta lists things we might expect, harming living beings, stealing, wrong speech, stuff like that, as akusala, unwholesome.
Because they lead to suffering.
Exactly, because they lead to suffering. And then it points to the roots. It identifies greed, ill will, and delusion as the fuel for all that negative behavior.
Okay. And then kusala, the wholesome, is sort of the flip side, abstaining from those things, but also something more.
Precisely. Kusala is about abstaining from the harmful actions. So not killing, not stealing, and so on. But it also involves cultivating the opposite roots.
Ah.
Lack of greed, lack of ill will, and lack of delusion, which is essentially cultivating clear understanding or right view itself.
So it's both action and view.
Yeah, and what's really insightful, I think, is that the sutta says understanding this distinction, seeing how unwholesome actions come from negative roots and cause suffering, and how wholesome actions come from positive roots and lead to well-being, that understanding itself is a key part of having right view.
Ah, okay. So seeing that ethical cause and effect clearly.
You got it. It's about perceiving the moral landscape accurately.
Okay, so that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Understanding wholesome and unwholesome actions and their origins. Then the sutta brings up ahara, usually translated as nutriment, but it sounds like it means much more than just, lunch.
Oh, absolutely. Ahara here is way broader. It refers to basically anything that sustains us, not just physically, but mentally too.
Yeah.
It even fuels the continuation of the cycle of rebirth, according to the text.
Wow, okay, so what kinds are there?
The sutta outlines 4 main types. First, there's the obvious one, physical food, coarse or fine, what we eat.
Right.
But then second, it includes contact. That's the meeting of our senses with the world. That interaction sustains us, feeds experience.
Interesting.
Third is mental volition. Our intentions, the choices we make, the energy behind our thoughts, that also keeps things going.
Okay.
And finally, consciousness itself is considered a type of nutriment. It sustains our ongoing sense of self and experience.
So it's like everything that fuels our existence on all these different levels. And how does this connect to craving?
Well, that's the link. The sutta says craving is the origin of ahara. Our desires, our attachments, our wanting, that's what keeps this whole process of sustenance going.
So if you stop the craving.
Then the ahara, the sustenance, ceases. And the path to ending that craving, no surprise, it's the Noble Eightfold Path.
Right.
The key point here is seeing how our desires aren't just feelings that pass through. They actively fuel our continued being, keeping us tied to the cycle. Understanding ahara helps us see that mechanism.
That makes a lot of sense. It's all fitting together. And that seems to lead us naturally to dukkha, suffering. The sutta gives a really broad definition, doesn't it?
It really does. Dukkha isn't just, stubbing your toe or feeling sad sometimes.
Right.
The sutta lists birth itself as dukkha, then aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, distress, even not getting what you want.
So the big life events and the everyday frustrations.
Exactly. And ultimately, it says the 5 aggregates of clinging, basically, our whole psychophysical makeup that we cling to are inherently unsatisfactory. It's this fundamental unease, the impermanence baked into conditioned existence.
So it's less about specific pains and more this underlying dissatisfaction. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. This pervasive sense of things not being quite right or stable or fulfilling, and the root cause of this dukkha.
Let me guess.
Craving.
You got it. The origin is identified specifically as the craving that leads to rebirth. It's described as being accompanied by delight and attachment, always seeking pleasure here and there.
And it lists different types.
Sensual craving, wanting pleasant sights, sounds, tastes, etc. Craving for existence, just wanting to continue to be. And even craving for non-existence, wanting things to end, annihilation. It's like this deep, persistent thirst.
A thirst that can't really be quenched.
Precisely. And the way out of this dukkha
is the cessation of that craving. Exactly. The complete fading away, cessation, abandonment, letting go, release, non-attachment to that very craving. Rooting the thirst.
in the path to do that.
Is, once again, the Noble Eightfold Path.
Okay.
So the core insight for right view here is understanding these four noble truths. What suffering is, where it comes from, craving, the fact that it can cease and the way to make it cease. The path. That understanding is right view in action.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so the sutta then seems to zoom in on specific links in this whole chain, starting with Dharmarana, aging and death.
Yes, it breaks them down.
Things we all experience, obviously, but it looks at them very directly.
It does. Jara, aging, is described very vividly. Decrepitude, old age, breaking down, gray hair, wrinkles, life force declining, senses wearing out. Just the raw facts of physical decay.
Dharmarana, death.
Similarly direct. Deceasing, passing away, breaking up, disappearance, dying, the completion of a lifespan, aggregates breaking down, laying aside the corpse. It doesn't shy away from the reality.
No, it doesn't. And what does the sutta say is the origin, the cause of this aging and death?
Birth, jati. It states very clearly that birth is the origin of aging and death.
If you're born.
Then aging and death inevitably follow. It's a natural consequence. So the cessation of birth leads to the cessation of aging and death.
And the path to that cessation.
Still the Noble Eightfold Path. The insight here for right view is seeing aging and death not as isolated tragedies, but as direct results of the condition of birth within this cycle.
Okay, following that logic, the next focus is jati, birth itself. And again, it seems broader than just the physical event.
Exactly. Jati, birth, isn't just the moment of delivery. It covers the whole process. Being born into a specific realm, the initial arising of our physical and mental components, the coming online of our senses. It's the entry point into this round of existence.
The start of a particular life. And what fuels this process? What makes birth happen?
Becoming. Bhava. This is identified as the origin of birth.
Becoming. Like the drive to exist.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. It's the momentum from past actions, desires, intentions, the whole force that propels consciousness into a new life, a new existence. Stop that process of becoming, and birth stops.
And the path?
Noble Eightfold Path, always leading back there. The key understanding, the right view aspect, is seeing that birth isn't random, it's conditioned. It arises because of this ongoing tendency towards becoming.
Right. So we just mentioned bhava, becoming. The sutta then unpacks that a bit more.
It does. It talks about three main types of becoming. There's sensual becoming, kamabhava, then form becoming, rupabhava, and formless becoming, arupabhava.
And these relate to different realms or states of existence.
Exactly. They correspond to the different planes of existence in Buddhist cosmology. The sensual world, the fine material or form worlds, and the immaterial or formless worlds. They're driven by different kinds and intensities of attachment.
Okay, so these are the different modes of being within the cycle. What drives this process? What's the origin of becoming?
Clinging, upadana. That's identified as the origin of becoming.
Clinging. Like attachment. Yes. Our grasping, our holding on tightly. Specifically, the sutta mentions clinging to things like sensual pleasures, clinging to views or opinions, clinging to rituals, and especially clinging to the idea of a permanent self. This clinging fuels the momentum that leads to continued existence in these various forms.
So if you let go of the clinging,
the becoming ceases, the fuel runs out. And again, the Noble Eightfold Path is the way to cultivate that letting go. The right view insight here is that our attachments aren't just passive feelings. They actively shape our future, propel us into further becoming.
Okay, and this upadana, clinging, it's not just one thing either, is it? The sutta breaks it down further.
That's right. It specifies four main types of clinging, which we just touched on. Clinging to sensual pleasures, sights, sounds, etc. Clinging to views, our opinions, ideologies. Clinging to rules and observances, believing rituals alone bring liberation. And clinging to a doctrine of self, the belief in a solid, unchanging me.
These seem like really fundamental ways we get stuck. They are. They represent the core ways we grasp onto experience and identity.
And what's underneath all this clinging? What's its root?
Craving. Tanha. This is pinpointed as the origin of clinging.
Ah, back to craving again.
Yes, it's central. Our desires, that thirst for pleasure, for existence, for security, for identity, that's what motivates us to grasp and hold on, to cling.
So eliminate the craving.
And the clinging naturally dissolves. The grasping has no basis. And the path to extinguish that craving.
Noble Eightfold Path.
You're seeing the pattern. The key point for right view is understanding that clinging isn't the ultimate root. It arises from craving.
Okay. We've mentioned craving tanha a few times now as a key driver. The Sutta then focuses on tanha itself.
Yes, it delves into the different types of craving.
What are they?
It lists 6 kinds corresponding directly to our 6 senses. So there's craving for forms, sights, craving for sounds, craving for smells, craving for tastes, craving for tactile sensations, touch, and craving for mental phenomena, thoughts, ideas, emotions.
So basically desire triggered by anything we experience through our senses or our mind.
Exactly. It's the wanting that arises directly from our interaction with the world.
And what gives rise to this craving? What sparks it off?
Feeling, vedana. This is named as the origin of craving.
Feeling, as in pleasant, unpleasant.
Precisely. The immediate experience of pleasantness, unpleasantness, or neutrality that arises when we make contact with something through our senses. That feeling is the condition for craving to arise.
How does that work?
Well, if a feeling is pleasant, we often crave for it to continue or crave more of it. If it's unpleasant, we crave for it to stop, crave for its absence. Even neutral feelings can lead to a subtle craving, maybe for things to stay as they are, or a background restlessness looking for pleasure.
Ah, okay. So the feeling tone directly fuels the wanting.
Right. So if you can interrupt that automatic reaction, that progression from feeling to craving, then craving can cease. And the path.
Noble Eightfold Path helps manage that reaction.
Yes, through mindfulness and wisdom. The right view insight is seeing that craving isn't random. It's a conditioned response, typically arising directly from feeling.
Okay, so now we're at Vedana, feeling. What comes before that in this chain?
The Sutta traces it back further. Vedana, feeling, is defined, as we said, by the 6 types arising from contact phassa with the 6 sense spaces.
So feelings arising from eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, and so on.
Exactly. Eye contact gives rise to feeling associated with seeing, ear contact to feeling associated with hearing, etc., for all 6 senses, including the mind. It's that immediate sensory hit, the raw experience having a tone pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
Okay, the initial evaluation almost.
Yeah.
And what precedes this feeling? What's its origin?
Contact itself, phassa, that's the origin of feeling.
Contact, how is that defined?
It's the simple coming together of 3 things. A sense organ, like the eye, a sense object, like a visible form, and the corresponding consciousness, eye consciousness, the simple awareness of seeing. When those 3 meet, that's contact.
Okay, organ, object, consciousness.
Right. That meeting, that phassa, is the necessary condition for Vedana feeling to arise. No contact, no feeling. And the Noble Eightfold Path helps us develop wisdom around this point of contact.
So right view involves seeing this dependence. Contact leads to feeling.
Precisely. Understanding that sequence is key.
So what then gives rise to phassa, to contact? We keep going back.
We do. The Sutta explains that the arising of the 6 sense bases themselves, sayatana, is the origin of contact.
The sense bases. You mean the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind.
Exactly. These are our internal faculties, our gateways for experience. Without these sense bases, there's no possibility for contact to occur. You need the door for anything to come through it.
Okay. So the existence of the senses allows for contact.
Yes. And the Noble Eightfold Path guides the wise use, the understanding, and ultimately the transcendence of reliance on these sense bases.
So right view here means understanding that contact depends on the sense bases existing. Right, so the Sutta consistently traces this back. Now we land on Sayatana, the 6 sense bases themselves.
Yes.
What's their origin?
Their origin is given as name and form, namarupa.
Name and form. We encountered that briefly with the aggregates. Can you break that down again?
Sure. Nama, name, refers to the mental aspects of our being. The Sutta lists feeling, perception, volition, contact, and attention here. Basically the mind and its functions.
Okay, the mental side. And rupa.
Rupa, form, is the physical side. The body, composed of the 4 great elements, earth, water, fire, air, and all the physical forms derived from them.
So mind and body, essentially.
Yes, the psychophysical organism.
Yeah.
These 2, nama and rupa, arise together dependently. They form the complete being, which possesses the sense bases. Without this combination of mind and body, there would be no faculties like the eye or the ear.
So the existence of a being with mind and body is what allows for sense organs.
That's the idea, and the Noble Eightfold Path helps us understand this mind-body interplay and not cling to it. Right view involves seeing the sense bases arise dependently on name and form.
Okay, let's keep going. What's the origin of Namarupa, of name and form? What brings the mental and physical together like this?
Consciousness. Vinyatcha. This is identified as the origin of name and form.
Consciousness.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Consciousness is seen as the linking factor, the awareness that connects the mental functions, nama, with the physical body, rupa, at the start of an existence, and sustains that connection. Think of it as the spark, maybe, that allows the whole psychophysical apparatus to function as a unit.
So consciousness is what enlivens the name and form.
In a sense, yes, it's the condition for them to exist as an integrated whole. If consciousness ceases in a particular stream, the Sutta suggests that specific formation of name and form associated with it also ceases. And the Noble Eightfold Path, particularly developing wisdom, guides our understanding of consciousness, preventing clinging to it. Right view means seeing how name and form depends on consciousness.
Okay, so now we're at Dinya, consciousness. Does the Sutta specify types here too?
Yes. Just like with craving and feeling, it lists 6 types of consciousness corresponding to the 6 sense bases.
So eye consciousness, ear consciousness.
Exactly. Eye consciousness is the simple awareness of seeing something. Ear consciousness is the awareness of hearing something. And so on for nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness, awareness of thoughts or mental objects. Each arises specifically in relation to its sense base and object.
Okay. And what conditions the arising of consciousness? What comes before it?
Volitional formations. Saltara, these are named as the origin of consciousness.
Volitional what are those exactly? Intentions, actions?
Both, really. They are our intentional actions, physical, verbal, and mental. They're the impulses, the choices, the mental fabrications, the karmic forces generated by our will. These formations create the tendencies, the predispositions, that condition which kinds of consciousness will arise in the future.
So our past actions and intentions shape our present consciousness.
That's the core idea. Think of sakhara as the seeds and consciousness as the sprout that grows from them. And the Noble Eightfold Path aims to cultivate wholesome sakhara, wholesome formations. Right view includes understanding this link.
We're getting very close to the beginning of this chain now, aren't we? So next up is sakhara, these volitional formations. What are they composed of?
The Sutta breaks them down into 3 types. There are bodily volitional formations. The text often uses the in and out breath as an example, something physical yet tied to intention.
Okay.
Then there are verbal volitional formations, things like applying thought and sustaining thought before speaking, the mental activity behind speech. And finally, mental volitional formations. These are identified as perception and feeling themselves, functioning as mental intentions or activities that shape future states. They're the forces that construct our experience.
Bodily, verbal, mental forces. And what's at the very root of these? What drives the formation of these intentions and actions?
Ignorance, avidya. This is stated as the origin of volitional formations.
Ignorance. So our lack of understanding is what drives our actions.
Fundamentally, yes. Our lack of seeing things as they truly are, especially not understanding the 4 noble truths, leads us to create intentions and perform actions that keep the cycle of suffering going. It's our basic confusion about reality that fuels the whole process.
And the antidote to this ignorance
is wisdom developed through the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, ultimately, is the direct opposite of avidya. Understanding this connection is crucial.
Okay, so we finally arrived at avidya, ignorance. How does this Sutta specifically define this ignorance?
It's defined very precisely. Avidya isn't just like not knowing facts. It's specifically the lack of knowledge concerning the 4 noble truths.
So not knowing suffering.
Right. Not knowing dukkha, not knowing its origin, craving, not knowing its cessation, and not knowing the path leading to its cessation, which is, of course, the Noble Eightfold Path itself. This fundamental misunderstanding of these 4 points is the bedrock ignorance.
The root of the whole chain we've just traced back.
Exactly. It's presented as the starting point, in a sense, for this cycle of dependent origination.
But does the Sutta go even one step further? What's the origin of ignorance itself?
It does. It says that the influxes, or taints the asavas, are the origin of ignorance.
Influxes, taints, what are those?
These are deep-seated mental defilements or pollutants. Think of them as deeply ingrained biases or outflows that cloud the mind and obscure clear seeing. Their presence conditions the arising of ignorance.
So these underlying pollutants cause the lack of understanding.
That's the relationship presented. The cessation of these asavas leads directly to the cessation of ignorance and the path to purifying the mind of these influxes.
Is the Noble Eightfold Path.
You've got it.
So finally, these asavas, these influxes or taints, what are they specifically? This seems like the ultimate root discussed here.
The sutta typically lists 3 main asavas. First, the influx of sensual pleasures, the deep-seated addiction to sensory gratification.
Okay.
Second, the influx of becoming the vasava, the deep desire for continued existence, to persist, to be.
Right.
And third, the influx of ignorance, afishasava, ignorance itself, considered as a deep-seated taint that perpetuates itself.
Interesting. So ignorance is both caused by the influxes and is an influx itself.
Yes, that's a fascinating point, highlighting the deeply cyclical and self-perpetuating nature of these fundamental obstacles. It shows how deeply embedded ignorance is. Sometimes the sutta also phrases it the other way around, saying ignorance is the origin of the asavas.
It really emphasizes the interconnectedness.
Absolutely. And breaking free from these asavas, these core defilements, is the ultimate goal, achieved through the consistent practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. Understanding the influxes, their origin, whether ignorance or vice versa, their cessation, and the path that constitutes the most profound level of right view described in this part of the sutta.
Wow. Okay. That is an incredibly detailed and intricate picture, tracing everything back step by step like that.
It really is. The Samadhi Sutta lays out right view not as one simple thing, but as this comprehensive, deeply interconnected understanding. It shows how our experience is built up layer by layer from ignorance and defilements. Through intentions, consciousness, mind and body, senses, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, all the way to birth, aging, death, and suffering.
And crucially, how understanding each link, its origin, its cessation, and the path to its cessation, that is what constitutes right view at each stage.
Exactly. It's a dynamic understanding of cause and effect, of dependent origination. And woven through it all is the constant refrain. The Noble Eightfold Path is the way out, the way to cultivate this right view and achieve liberation.
So as you, the listener, take all this in, maybe just consider, how does understanding these connections, seeing this chain from, say, a feeling sparking a craving or ignorance fueling an action, how might that shift your own perspective?
Yeah, how might seeing this framework change how you relate to your own thoughts, feelings, and choices day to day?
It gives you a map, doesn't it? A map of why things are the way they are, and potentially a map towards greater clarity and freedom from that cycle of suffering.
It really does. It's a profound set of teachings to reflect on.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for walking us through that intricate web, and thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive.